Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a concept that sounds like it belongs purely in a history class, but well, it's actually all around us. Oligarchy.
Exactly. And when we dig into the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series, which is our source material for this, the really stunning thing is just how little the core mechanisms of rule by the few have actually changed.
So our mission today is to trace that line, isn't it? From those ancient origins right up to today's power structures.
Right. To give you a really rapid insight into how those old Greek foundations are still propping up a lot of modern institutions.
I mean, think about it. The strategies that an elite council used 2,000 years ago, they're not so different from what you might see in, say, a corporate boardroom today.
That's the goal here, to shed some light on these big ongoing issues of representation, legitimacy, because if a tiny group is making decisions for millions...
You have to ask if that's fair or accountable.
Precisely. And just as a quick setup, the word itself tells you a lot. It's from the Greek, oligoi,
Meaning few.
and archein, meaning to rule.
So let's start there, at the source. Classical Greek systems. What was the most direct, sort of structural way they limited who got to participate?
It was eligibility, pure and simple. Political rights were tied directly, and I mean directly, to economic status.
So it all came down to money.
Money and land. Decision-making was strictly for landowners, for aristocrats. You needed property, you needed a noble family line. That was the filter. And it immediately excluded the vast majority of people.
And the big thinkers of the day, the philosophers, they saw this happening. They weren't fooled by it.
Oh, not at all. Plato famously called oligarchy what it was: a government where the rich rule for their own personal gain. And crucially, he said they actively neglect the welfare of everybody else because, well, why wouldn't they? Self-interest was the entire point.
Did anyone push back on that? I mean, was there an argument that maybe rule by the wealthy was more competent or stable?
Well, Aristotle gave the deepest warning about that very idea. He noted that oligarchies make this really dangerous assumption, that wealth equals virtue or merit. By tying political rights strictly to how much you own, he said you basically guarantee corruption.
Because the only goal becomes protecting what you own.
Exactly. The only policies that get passed are the ones that protect and increase that ownership. The system's stability is just the stability of the elite's own self-interest.
That structural insight, that link between wealth and the right to rule,
Yeah.
that feels like the key. So let's look at some examples. We always pit Sparta and Athens against each other, but did they both have this kind of exclusion built in?
Absolutely. Start with Sparta, the textbook case. You have the Gerousia.
The Council of Elders.
Right, the Council of 28 Elders and the two kings. To even be considered, you had to be a man, over 60, from a specific noble family. That mechanism ensured power just stayed concentrated in this tiny, predictable group. Forever.
A microscopic sliver of the population making decisions for everyone. So what about Athens?
Well, Athens had the bull, a council of 500, and it was selected by lot, which on the surface, it looks really inclusive.
Right, a lottery seems fair.
But you still had to meet these incredibly strict property and citizenship requirements. Most of the population was still excluded from the lottery pool itself. So even in a more democratic system, economic privilege was still the gatekeeper.
So the real barrier was economic, no matter how you selected people.
It was. And there's another critical piece here, which is the actual physical architecture of control. What do you mean by that? Well, the council chambers themselves were small. They were physically limited in size. This wasn't an accident. It reinforced this intimate, face-to-face deliberation among elites who already knew each other, who already had the same interests. You couldn't have mass participation.
That's a powerful point. The exclusion wasn't just a law, it was baked into the very design of the room.
Exactly. It was structural. You were shut out because of the time commitment, the cost, or just not having the rank to be in that small inner circle.
And I guess that structural resilience is why it didn't just die out with the Greeks.
It just evolved.
So the system of rule by the few kept going. It just changed the eligibility criteria. Where do we see this continuity most clearly after Greece?
Oh, look at medieval Venice. A perfect example. After the Serrata of 1297, which was basically a law that locked down who could be in charge, Participation in their great council was restricted to only about 2,000 noble families
They just close the door behind them.
for centuries. And you see that same fusion of economic and political power in the Dutch Republic. You had the merchant families, the so-called regents.
Right.
They controlled city governance and trade. At the same time, the people writing the laws were the ones profiting from them.
That's the ultimate form of efficiency, I suppose, for the ruling class anyway.
For them, absolutely. And you see this pattern everywhere if you look. The noble democracy in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the boyar councils in Russia, gentry networks in China. The names are different, but the restrictive mechanism is identical.
So why did it stick around? Why was this model so powerful across so many different cultures?
Because it delivered. It provided efficient decision-making and stability. But, and this is the key, that efficiency and stability was only for those already in control. It streamlined the process of protecting their own shared interests.
Okay, so this is where we bring it into the present.
Mm-hmm.
How does that historical pattern map onto our world? If the ancient power was in a small physical room, where is it now?
Well, political science would tell you that power is now embedded in institutions that look a lot like those ancient councils.
Like what?
Committees, regulatory boards, advisory councils. They have this veneer of being neutral or technical, but they function to protect elite interests through, controlled participation.
So the modern council chamber isn't limited by walls, but by who has the institutional status, the credentials, or just the time to be there.
Exactly. And anthropology shows us that those old social ties, kinship, patronage, they haven't gone away. They've just morphed. Now it's sophisticated social networking, high-level lobbying, exclusive alliances, the same human instincts for cooperation, just on a global digital scale.
And economically, this is where Aristotle's warning really comes roaring back.
It really does. Economic analysis shows pretty clearly that concentrated wealth will inevitably translate into political power. Modern oligarchic entities aren't kings. They're corporate monopolies, financial institutions, lobbying groups. They shape policy with capital, not with a crown.
It's fascinating how the media reflects this, too. You think of older films like Citizen Kane, and it's all about one powerful tyrant.
Yes, but the modern narratives, think of a show like Succession. It's all about systemic control. Power isn't in one person, it's in the interconnected network. The family, the board, the advisors, all coordinating behind the scenes. The network itself is the king.
Which brings us to a really crucial point, the specific mechanics of how these elites cooperate, and that nagging problem of legitimacy.
Right. So today, the exclusion still relies on formal criteria, your rank, your net worth, but the real glue comes from the informal stuff.
The soft skill.
The soft skills, the mutual dependencies, going to the same elite schools, knowing the social etiquette. You need the credentials on paper, but you also have to speak the language and know the right people.
And that raises the same question Plato and Aristotle were asking. If a tiny group decides for everyone, how is that ever fair? How do you justify it?
Well, you manage that problem of legitimacy by disguising the exclusivity. You use the language of efficiency or meritocracy. You mask the unequal access by insisting that only the qualified, the experts, can handle these complex decisions.
And we've talked a lot about exclusion, but cooperation inside the group is just as important.
After everything. Elites understand they need each other. They build trust through shared institutions, shared social circles. It turns rivals into collaborators. They're all united by mutual benefit, and the internal stability makes the whole structure incredibly resilient and hard to change.
It's such a striking and persistent pattern. The main lesson from the Kondrashov series seems to be that these tools of elite control, eligibility rules, social ties, structural exclusion, they've been with us for thousands of years, from a Spartan council to a modern corporate board.
The clear takeaway is that oligarchic systems thrive whenever access to decision-making is limited. It doesn't matter what you call the system. And, recognizing these continuities, these historical echoes, that's the first step toward actually seeing the barriers we have today and maybe promoting some real transparency.
So the study of ancient rule by the few isn't just history. It's a guide to understanding how power works in your life right now.
Exactly. So we'll leave you with a thought to take away. Think about a formal decision-making body you interact with. It could be a committee at work, a local board, even a club. What are the specific eligibility criteria or the informal social dynamics that structurally limit who gets to participate? And how might that exclusion be masked with the language of efficiency or merit? That's the ancient pattern playing out right in front of you.